Analyst Jeffrey Toobin and Jesslyn Radack of the Government Accountability Project. She's a former whistleblower in connection with the investigation of the so-called American Taliban, John Walker Lynn, and now represents people doing what she once did. Jeff, let me start with you. Do you believe the British government was justified in detaining David Miranda for some 9 hours?
I sure do. Let's be clear about what Mr. Miranda's role was here. I don't want to be unkind, but he was a mule. He was given something, he didn't know what it was, from one person to pass to another at the other end of an airport. Our prisons are full of drug mules. Glenn's view is, as long as one of the two people on either end of that transaction was a journalist, he can take anything he wants. He could take the nuclear launch codes. He could take the names of our undercover agents.
His flight was paid for by The Guardian, though, so wasn't, in effect, he acting in a journalistic capacity?
No, I don't think that matters a bit, who pays for your ticket. I mean, he's on a plane with stuff that is highly classified, you know, anything he wants. It turns out it wasn't the names of our undercover agents. It was the extremely classified, presumably, NSA material. That is not the law.
But does it, I mean, he's being detained under a British UK terrorism act, which is only supposed to be used to detect and find people who are connected to terrorists. There's no indication that David Miranda, they knew who he was. They knew he's not connected to some terrorist group.
Great Britain has its own laws that are similar to ours, but that are somewhat different. Their terrorism law takes it one step farther. They say it's not just the material this person is a terrorist, but can be used by terrorists. And frankly, if terrorists know how we surveil their cell phone calls, how we surveil their texts, that could be useful to terrorists.
Couldn't any information published by a journalist be used by terrorists in some way? And,
no.
and can't that excuse be used to then detain journalists?
Not at all. Not classified not classified information of this. I mean, it would have to be classified information of this kind.
Jesslyn, what do you think?
You know, I think that argument is completely vacuous. First of all, as Mr. Toobin says, he is presuming. He, in fact, has no idea what was on those thumb drives and other documents and electronics that were seized. Nobody does. But no matter what was on there, it obviously had to do with journalism. Laura Portress is a journalist and a documentarian. Glenn Greenwald is a journalist, and David was serving as an in-between, not as a drug mule. I have to wonder why the U.S. government and our allies are so desperate to keep our illegality secret and our law-breaking secret that they're willing to use a terrorism law to try to stop a journalist.
But Jesslyn, just to be devil's advocate here, I mean, if the British government thought there were stolen documents that were being transported, why don't they have the right to stop this person and check?
The British government, if it thought they had stolen documents, could go through the criminal process rather than using an anti-terrorism law, which has nothing to do with stolen documents. And there's been no evidence of that whatsoever put forth even by the British government itself that they thought these were stolen documents.
Mr. Miranda was lucky that they used the terrorism law because he wasn't even delayed. He wasn't even stopped overnight. I mean, I'm sure it was inconvenient to be stopped for 9 hours at the airport, but when it happens to you on JetBlue, they don't even offer you a lawyer. So, I mean, I just don't think he was sent to the gulag. He was delayed for a while, and they took what appears to be stolen classified information. I think Mr. Miranda actually did pretty well, considering what he was carrying.
I have to interject. I hope the next time that Mr. Toobin is stopped for 9 hours and detained with no due process on an anti-terrorism law that he is equally as generous with his assessment. But clearly, being detained on a terrorist law, an anti-terrorism law, having spent time on the no-fly list myself, is pure government retaliation against a whistleblower, and it's a criminalization of journalism and whistleblowing that had been going on. And frankly, the United States has been behaving in a completely unhinged, desperate, and rather foolish way in dealing with this.
Jesslyn, you talked about due process. Under British law, though, there is no right to stay silent in this case. There is no, under this UK law, there is no right to have an attorney present. They actually offered him one of their attorneys. He declined. But under this law, the person being questioned has no right to have counsel there.
I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing that under this law, to be held under Schedule 7 of this particular law, you have to have a reasonable nexus to terrorism. And here, there has been absolutely none asserted unless someone is trying to make the government, the argument that journalism is the new terrorism.
Well, what about that, Jeff? I mean, that is Glenn Greenwald's argument that basically it's linking journalism, conducting journalism to acts of terror.
The word journalism is not magical immunity sauce that you can put on anything. That you can put on anything and eliminate any sort of liability. You know what? If he had the nuclear launch codes in there, he could, that they can take that. If he had the names of undercover operatives, they can take that. Our government and the British government regards the method of surveillance as just as serious a security breach. Now, that's the law. And I'm sorry Glenn thinks that's a bad thing, but, that's the law. And if you go through an airport carrying that stuff, you take your chances.
Jeff, what do you think of the fact that British authorities showed up at the offices of The Guardian demanding that they destroy 2 hard drives that had information, I guess, relating to Snowden, classified information?
Grotesque and appalling.
So you think that was too far?
Huge difference. When we show up at the border somewhere, we know we're going to have our stuff searched. We know there are certain rules.
But he didn't go through customs, David Miranda. He was in a transit.
Yeah, well, you take your chances. But inside a country that that believes in free press, that they would destroy a computer. I mean, imagine here at CNN, authorities walking in and demanding that they destroy our computers. I think it was horrific. I think it was terrible. And I think it's important to draw distinctions between different kinds of government activity.
Justin, you agree with that? I think that was too far, certainly.
I think that's a distinction without a difference. By detaining him in a transit zone on a terrorism law when there was no suspicion whatsoever, even asserted by the United Kingdom, was purely a pretextual detention under the very inflammatory label of terrorism. And the way I understood the incident at The Guardian to unfold is that the UK wanted copies of the information, and instead The Guardian wisely said, we will destroy it before handing it over to you, which is a principled thing to do. And when it suits Mr. Toobin's interests, he's glad to claim First Amendment principles in shielding newspapers, but then at the same time he's willing to dispense with those completely when dealing with a terrorism statute, detaining a completely innocent person involved in the conduct of journalism.
It's called drawing distinctions. I mean, there's different situations have different results, and I don't apologize for that in the least. You're running around the world with extremely classified information, and you don't even know what it is. You're being used as a mule. You take your chances, and I think Mr. Miranda got extremely lucky in only being delayed 9 hours in London.
All right, we got to leave there. Good discussion. Justin Radack, good to have you on the program. Jeff Toobin as well.